Welcome to Beyond Just Business, the podcast for those who want more. More clarity, more direction, and potentially more meaning. We explore the thinking behind success, the habits that shape performance, and the questions that go deeper than profit margins. If you're ready to challenge the obvious and rethink the way life and business work, you are absolutely in the right place. Now, welcome back to episode 3. So myself and Paul are still talking, and the importance, I suppose, of the cadence of what we're looking at here. The first episode we had was about confidence. The second one was about resilience. And today we're going to be talking about growth through discomfort. When I say growth through discomfort, what comes to mind, Paul? Don't think about it.
I wasn't. I was actually thinking of something else. I was thinking I should
The
go.
shopping list. Focus, Paul. Come on. We're sponsored here by Diet Coke. Well, we're not yet.
I was thinking I should run out and change my shirt and pretend that it's
listen, we're not pretenders here, Paul. People,
Or-
you're just consistent. You got 48 pairs of the same pants and shorts. Don't worry about it.
Oh my God. Growth through discomfort. God, I don't know where to start on this one. Oh, give me a lead. Where do you want to start on this one?
I put it this way. Let's imagine we're in a debate. And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that there is only growth in discomfort. I think our natural state as human beings is to avoid pain. And I liken it to a Band-Aid on your arm, and you spend forever and a day not pulling it off too harshly so you don't hurt yourself. But there is also a purpose that you want to get the Band-Aid off. Some of the best things that have ever happened to me have happened when I've been deeply uncomfortable. And that could be something, an event I don't want to go to, a job I don't necessarily want to do, someone I may not want to meet, or a conversation I don't want to have. So if I was to come to you and say, well, that's the order of the day, discomfort is where it's at, is there both sides to that? Do you have to have an equal and opposite, like a way of neutralizing what discomfort is? Or do you think nowadays discomfort is something that we live where we have technology, we have money, we have Wi-Fi, we don't have to wait 48 hours for a landing page to load anymore? Where do you think discomfort what do you think discomfort's role is in modern day, in the modern workplace or modern life?
I suppose it depends on the circumstance and the context. I think a lot of people stay in their comfort zone, and therefore any element for them to step out of their comfort zone will be discomfort. Hence the reason why it's called comfort zone. But so I think it depends on the context and depends on the circumstances. Whereas you could have somebody that encounters an event, and to them it's a traumatic event, but they can either learn from it or they can allow that event to take over their life or their situation at that point in time. Is there growth through discomfort? Absolutely in the majority of cases, I would say. But I think you've got to be open to learning from the event or the discomfort. Where I see a lot of things happening is that in some respects, it's a feedback mechanism for ourselves. So if we come across a challenge or we come across something that we don't find particularly comfortable, what is actually the feedback to ourselves to learn from that situation? So let me just give an example for listeners. Say you are going through a period in time and you are having the discomfort of not having enough money. Let's just call it simple, because that's money is always a big thing for an awful lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going through a period of time, you don't have enough money. You're concerned about paying the bills, concerned about paying your mortgage or your rent. You don't know where, either if you're self-employed, you don't know where the next paycheck is going to come from, because being self-employed, you pretty much don't know where this next paycheck is coming from. But so you're still worried about the future. It is not a comfortable space to be in. But really, if you're to step back and ask yourself, okay, so what's the learning or the lesson seen as being feedback from the situation that you're actually finding? And what you find for a lot of things is that you're not either doing the actions that you're supposed to be doing, or you're supposed to be doing other actions to get you out of your comfort zone in order to get you to the next level or the next stage. And pretty much it's down to inaction is what I'd say, meaning that people they're not doing the actions that they're supposed to do or that they're being guided to do because they want to feel and remain in their comfort zone. So that circumstance of having lack of money right now at the moment, for example, is just a feedback mechanism. You know that there's something you're supposed to be doing. Or it can be a situation whereby you're too attached to it. So if you're too attached, again, let's just say money. If you're too attached to the money, well, then all you're doing is pushing the money away. So you got to get to a point whereby you've just got to let it go, and you got to let the circumstances, learn from the circumstances, because again, it's all feedback. And once you got an attachment to anything, well, then now you are going to repel what it is that you're being attached to. So you can take that in any area of life. So you can take it from finances. The more you're attached to the money, and the money's your focus, you're pushing that away. The more you're attached to a relationship, again, the more you're going to push that relationship away. The more you're attached to health and things not happening in your life from a health perspective, pretty much what you're going to have happen is a whole lot of health issues come up in your life, again, in order for you to learn the lesson of not being attached. So there's so much to kind of unpack from discomfort, to be honest with you, whereby we could go no end of anywhere on this particular subject matter.
Do you think discomfort gets a bad rap?
Does discomfort get a bad rap? That's a good one. I think it depends. Honestly, it depends on who you're talking to. Straight away, what comes into mind is a group of people that all they talk about is everything that's wrong, everything is negative, woe is me, always giving out, and so on. And they never point a finger at themselves, and they're just stuck in the same damn place. And really, really frustrating. And I'm trying to limit my time being exposed to them as much as I possibly can, but certain circumstances mean that I can't. Won't do it. Go into any more details of that, but depends who's listening. But whereas there's other people that actually see, now don't get me wrong, you can get paralyzed by discomfort. You can go back into fight or flight or freeze. You're going to experience one of those, but you've got to, once you're experiencing one of those, and understand that every single situation, nearly every single situation, I don't like absolutes, as you know, most situations are there as feedback. So it's a case of being able to step back and say, okay, so what am I to learn from this? How does it serve me? What are the benefits of it? What am I to do? Now you're approaching from a control perspective, and you got to control the controllables, and that's what you can absolutely control.
So we're almost layering on. If we were to imagine this as a kind of a lesson system or a guided, a guided series to your better self, when you're looking at the confidence piece we talked about, and then layering in resilience is almost the level 2. So the confidence and competence. So you're working on something, showing what you can do. And then that's almost a proof point as to how you can show or prove confidence to yourself or to others through those competence pieces. Then you're layering in resilience, which is sticking with it, looking at the challenges. When you look at discomfort, do you think sometimes people lean? I mean, nowadays we can choose to do whatever we want within reason. There's someone in the world making money there's people making money doing unspeakable things, but there's people also making money doing the most random things. So I suppose when I think of comfort now, we've never been at a more comfortable stage of life in terms of food, for touch wood, for so many of us is so readily available. We've access to education, healthcare, everything else. So comfort is essentially so close and so ingrained to what we do. Do you think it becomes a slight outlier when people have to seek discomfort? So, David Goggins comes to mind. I read his book, and for anyone who is watching or listening, he's someone who seeks out pain through endurance on a daily basis. He's the type of guy that if I was at his birthday party and I wished him happy birthday, I'd be afraid. I think he'd punch me in the face. I think he'd rather I hit him with a brick to celebrate his birthday than anything else. Now, I look at that as someone who's almost on the other side as an overcorrection. So he seeks out discomfort as his everyday, as opposed to necessarily looking at the balance. But do you think nowadays there's any impetus for people to actually be uncomfortable? So let's say life is comfortable enough for people and it's just enough. I think that's the most dangerous 2 words in the English dictionary. Just enough to stop you making a decision. Just enough to not go do something. Do you think now there's any real impetus for people to be uncomfortable because they have everything they want, all things considered?
Sometimes, but events will typically show for people that will actually force them out of their comfort zone, because you're not meant to stay in your comfort zone. So circumstances will show up, and this is how the universe works, will to show up in order to actually get you out of your comfort zone. So let's just say somebody that is in a relationship and they think everything's, bed rolls, or they're not overly happy in the relationship, and they're just not going to do anything to improve that relationship. An event will show up in order to force them to do something. So whether their other partner comes home one day and says, actually, this is finished. I'm out of here. Now they have to do something. If you take an employment, exactly the same thing. They're comfortable in the job that they're doing, And then the universe will show them an event in order to actually get them out of their comfort zone to do what they need to do. And lo and behold, one day they're made redundant. So I think the universe is so perfect in how it works that it doesn't want an individual to be in their comfort zone, because the bottom line is, if they're in their comfort zone and staying there, they're not growing, they're not evolving. And part of our purpose in life is actually to evolve and grow. So you won't stay there for much longer. So is there an impetus? There isn't an impetus for a lot of people. I absolutely will agree on that one. But I think circumstances will show up when they least expect it. Because the universe is so perfect, when they least expect it, in order for it to help them to grow.
And this is actually the jumping off point where I would love you to explain for anyone. I think one of the three fascinating things I learned from you was the feather, the brick, and the truck. So without further ado, would you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Okay. So I use the analogy of the feather, the brick, and the truck, because the feather is like, if you can imagine the touch of a feather, it's very slight. So the universe and our unconscious is constantly trying to give us nudges. And those nudges in the sense of a feather might be, you could be listening to this podcast episode, for example, and something resonates deep down within you. And you kind of say, actually, you know what? Maybe I should do this. That's your intuitive flash. That's your intuitive inspired thought. It's the universe. It's your unconscious trying to nudge you in the right direction. You could be reading a book. You could be watching a movie. You could be walking down the road and you see a sign, or somebody says something to you. And then all of a sudden something deep inside resonates to say, yeah, I should do that. But then your ego takes over, or whatever it be, and you just forget it and you just move on. Now, if we don't listen to the feathers, well, then the brick comes along. And the brick is a little bit more subtle than the feathers, you can imagine. And so it comes up in every single area of life. And if you can imagine, it shows up from the point of view of, if from a health perspective, it'll be an illness that you can recover from, but it kind of stops you in your tracks for either a couple of days or a few weeks, but you can still overcome it. It's not life altering in any shape or form, but it does give you pause for thought. If it's financial area of life, it will be the loss of a client, or the loss of an income, or a source of finances, or a lump sum of money that you've lost on the stock exchange or something. But it will hit your finances in some shape or form. When it comes to relationships, it could be a disagreement that, again, puts you for pause, and be out of that relationship for, a couple of weeks or a couple of months, but you might still go back into the exact same relationship again. So that's when the brick is trying to get your attention in order for you to pursue the way of how the universe wants to guide you to. And if we don't listen to the brick, the truck comes along. Now, the truck hits, again, every single area of life. If it's finances, well, then it will be bankruptcy. It will be dissolution of the business. It'll be a major financial setback. It could be repossession of your home, complete financial ruin from that side of things. If it's health, it'll be an illness that it is life altering. Now, can you overcome it? You absolutely can, but it will be absolutely life altering. And then if it's a relationship, there will be a separation or a divorce. So it'll be separation, it'll be permanent separation. So that's the universe trying to guide you on what it is that you're supposed to do. Now, what I mean by supposed to, the universe is there to serve you. You got complete free will, but it's trying to help you to do what is absolutely best for you and to fulfill your purpose, what it is that you came here to do. So it's constantly trying to guide you. And that's literally how the feather, brick, and truck operate. So it depends on if you had a few bricks, which the vast majority of people will have had a few bricks. A good number of people that have come across will have definitely had trucks. It's a case of taking a step back and saying, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this? What am I denying in my life for myself, and what I should be pursuing? That's really what you should be doing.
And do you think it's that the avoidance of listening? So like you said, when someone pops into your head, I mean, I've had to learn and relearn that if an idea comes to mind, or if a name comes to mind, not that I can slam on the brakes in the middle of traffic, but where safe, I will automatically say, I have to pay heed to this. Something's telling me to, and it could just be a random text. And we all know where someone gives you a buzz out of the blue, in inverted commas, and you say, I was only thinking about you. Or you think about someone and you meet them somewhere. And I've seen that time and again. So when you think of these nudges that people are getting, Is it that people have become numb to that because we live in a day and age where we haven't had to lean into our senses as much as we might have years ago? So let's say, when you're hunter gatherer, when you're listening, when you're like, even now, I use the example of when I'm coming out, when I'm merging onto a road. I used to be able to listen because I love my cars, but like, let's say if I could listen, I could pretty much tell you what car it is. Now I can't hear anything, so I have to look.
Well,
I can't
electric cars.
smell. There's no petrol. There's no noise. There's no nothing. So my senses have been almost dulled by how I would interact. Like that's only an arbitrary example. But do you think nowadays people are almost numb to leaning into what something is trying to tell them, but maybe discomfort? See, I suppose the suffering element of life or discomfort, the uncomfortable element gets a bit of a bad rap, but sometimes it's in those moments that you're kind of brought back to yourself or back to that moment. Where you could be going for a run or you could be out and it lashes rain. There's a resilience in staying out in the rain, but then there's also an appreciation and an awareness of your body and what's happening. And then you have that inflection point of, I was cold and it's wet, and now I'm back home and I'm warm and I'm dry. But it kind of gives you, like you said, pause for thought. Is there a numbness with people now where they just don't? It's always the day just flies by and they don't get a chance to go through their senses, or they don't get a chance to reflect on how what things mean or an idea that flits into their head, and they put it down to maybe a daydream.
I think it's down to the fact that they haven't used the muscle.
That's a good way
So
of putting it.
I see intuition as being, it's a muscle that you got to use. So as we've gone through life, so there's a few things that will help to develop your intuition and develop that muscle. But we've lost those ways. So for example, even one simple exercise is handwriting. And this is where journaling really was to try and get people to handwriting. But some people still do journaling, type in a computer or put on their smartphone. That's not journaling in the true sense. So when you're handwriting, you are activating the executive center part of your brain. And the executive center is more connected with your intuitive side. So by doing handwriting, you're developing your intuition. Now, all we've done over the years is we started with smartphones, we're doing laptops, we're doing iPads, we're doing all other ways, and very few people actually do handwriting. So now we're not utilizing that part of, or that mechanism to develop intuition. Back in the day, when there wasn't the internet, and you worked from 9 to 5, you went home and you did different activities. So whether you worked in the garden or you read the newspaper or you did other activities with your family or whatever, and so on, you were doing different things. But whereas majority of people now are either glued in front of a television, which is the biggest screen that they could possibly get, because it's, now it's up to, 55 or 72 square inches or whatever they are for a TV. If they're not watching that, they're on their smartphones, and they're not on that, they're on their iPads. So they're connected to an electronic device as opposed to actually just not having a television, just switching off. And it was an indirect form of meditation because they were doing another activity that just relaxed the conscious mind in order to open that intuitive side. So I think it's more around that we've lost that connection and we've lost that muscle. The muscle now become really, really weak. Whereas, as you know, a lot of the work that I try and do with clients is actually to develop that muscle, build it an awful lot more. And therefore now you get guided more by your intuitive side, the unconscious side, and you take that guidance to leapfrog forward in your business or your life to get what it is that you want. And it's less about forcing the boulder up the hill. No, just take guidance from your intuitive side, and now you'll achieve what you want to achieve far easier.
And from those, like, there will be people who listen and kind of go, intuition, universe. I'm all right, thanks. I'm okay. I don't need, I don't need any of that. I've read The Secret and it's not my bag. But you did mention the executive center. So for those, I think there's one thing that'll make people's ears prick up when they hear conversations, and they become defensive when they think of universe, because obviously I know you have multiple meanings for that, and I suppose the word there to relate to different people and how they perceive the world around them. But you mentioned the executive center. What does that mean from the perspective of writing?
So the executive center is in the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex is located just behind your forehead. So that's where the part of the brain that it's located. Its function of the brain is all about planning, creativity, objectivity. That's what it does. When you think of it this way, so let's go back to caveman days, cave person days, just be politically correct.
Was that the 90s?
When you go back to those days and you're out foraging for food, your intuitive side was heightened because you had to keep a sense out for predators. So as soon as your intuitive sense picked up that a predator was near, it connected with your executive center, prefrontal cortex, objectivity, planning, creativity. So what's the creative way of me getting out of the situation? What's the objective? It's to get out of the situation. How do I plan to get out of the situation? That's what the executive center does, but it's directly connected with the intuitive side, the intuitive sense. So now it's to get back to the cave as quickly as possible. We just lost that. So we're using science, but what's happened over the years is people have attached it to a woo-woo side, or this whole area of, oh, that's not for me. But actually, you were born with it. You have it. It can be proven, absolutely proven. So now it's a case of, do you want to utilize it to your advantage, or do you want to just dismiss it for something that may not serve you? I can take a practical example. You just take ChatGPT and AI. We had a conversation in episode 1 or 2 whereby people are fearful of using ChatGPT. That's their own fear keeping them small, for one better word, as opposed to embracing it and utilize it and see what they can actually do with it. Intuition, exactly the same thing. So people are fearful of it. They don't understand it. They don't understand where it comes from and all of those things. But actually, the more you embrace it and the more you trust it, now, cheapers, the doors that opens for you is phenomenal. It's huge. And people that have really embraced it can see the evidence, can see the difference. And therefore, but vast majority of them are not. So you can take every single successful individual, or let's say, again, absolutes. You can take the vast majority of really successful individuals and they're using their intuitive side, and they've maximized how to develop their intuition. So the vast majority of successful individuals, I'm talking about financial success, will do meditation. What does meditation do? It opens the doorway to intuition. So they know that that's the doorway, so that's what they're going to open to it. So they will always refer to, oh no, I have a good feeling of doing this particular business deal or whatever. That's intuition. They may not use the word intuition, but they're using their gut feeling or their own, it just feels right. It's just intuition. But people have, you're right, people have perceived as being, oh no, that's way out there, it's too woo-woo. No, it's fact. It's a tool to be used, and it's the most precise tool you could ever come across.
Do you think, 2 questions to round off this conversation. Do you think it's almost a PR element around, and I don't mean that there's a collective conspiracy against your intuition. I mean more, like you said, the wording. So, someone might say, well, how do you know not to get on the flight? I said a gut feeling. Like a gut feeling seems more visceral. It seems more caveman-esque or cave person-esque, as opposed to, well, my intuition. Because obviously people will have a leaning towards, I'm Janie Mac. I'm not sitting down with a shroud over my head and incantations left, right, and center to decide what I'm going to do for lunch. What do you think created that concept that jars with people? That's not for me because it's X, Y, Z, as opposed to it being, well, a gut feeling is acceptable, whereas my intuition isn't.
So I think you hit the nail on the head when you came out and said that we've all heard about The Secret. But here's the thing. So I bring everything back to a pendulum. So you've had on one side of the pendulum whereby it's everything's from the mind, everything's from the head. And we only think from the head, and we look at data, we look at facts, we look at information that we can absolutely stand over. Everything's absolutely, completely science-based. So that's on one side of the pendulum. The far side of that pendulum then is all what people will perceive as being woo-woo, which is, okay, now let me get my crystal out and I'll see what the crystal says. Or let me take a deck of cards out and let's see what the deck of cards says. So now we put all the onus or the authority or the power into an object, whether it be a gemstone or whether it be a card or whatever. So people now have seen the other side of the pendulum from that perspective, and it's completely the other side. Whereas equilibrium point is actually no, both. It's bringing the merge of both. So you'll always hear me saying, look for the evidence, show me the evidence. But when you merge your intuitive side with the evidence, now you're showing that the intuitive side is always right. So you don't have to, sit in a lotus position or to have crystals or cards or pendulums or whatever it might be. You don't need any of that whatsoever because you're putting the power into something else. you're the power. You hold the power. So therefore, you operate from that perspective. So, but what happened when The Secret came out in the book and the movie? People thought all they needed to do was kind of just sit there, visualize, and they could manifest anything that they wanted into their life. But that was one universal law, one of 12 universal laws. There's 12 universal laws. If you don't know the other 11 universal laws and how they are all interconnected and how they all work together, well, then it's very, very difficult to make one law operate on your behalf. So it did a huge amount of damage, to be quite honest with you. So people were trying to apply the law of attraction, which is the teaching of The Secret. They're trying to apply the law of attraction. They couldn't get it working. They didn't understand why they weren't getting it working. And now they just say, oh, that's just woo-woo. It's useless stuff, or it doesn't work, or whatever it might be, and so on. But actually, you weren't given a full toolbox. You got to know all the 12 universal laws and how the universe works from that perspective. What I say is the universe is perfect and nothing is ever missing. And when you know how the universe works, well, then now you can work it to your advantage. So that's where it comes into play. But that's where you join. What I always try and do is I try and join the science with, for one better word, call it spirituality, call it the universe, call it a higher mind, higher consciousness, collective consciousness, whatever you want to call it. It's trying to merge both of those and showing the evidence in people's lives to say that this is how it works, this is how it operates. And now you work along those lines.
What I find interesting as you say that is, for context for anyone else, you are a qualified accountant. So
Yeah.
I think this, and what I find very funny when you think of conversations like this, it's not that you started off as a Reiki master and then moved into reflexology and then dovetailed into intuition. I think not that it's there needs to be credence added to it, but when I think of a conversation that can be well-rounded, coming from a place of practicality, anyone I know who works in the financial sphere has a certain way of thinking that things have to add up to an extent, but also there's an analytical part of it. And that's what I love about these types of conversations, because everything is always everything. It's always both sides all the time. But I think what's interesting, like you said, is people have this polarized idea of what they think one thing may be. You know, masculinity is X. You can't be kind and tough at the same time. Intuition, you can't be, you can't have that gut visceral feel and not be woo woo. It's this balance of these things that need to be justified. But I want to finish off with one last question for people who, to go back to your writing element. You mentioned before in conversation about auto writing. What would that be? Would that be something that may help people if they're trying to explore their intuition or go back to that analog way of thinking rather than just turning on the TV? Could you explain a little bit about that to finish off?
Yeah. So automatic writing is whereby you get a pad and pen. All right. So not on computer, not on typing, or you get a notepad and pen, and you start off writing. And
so it has to be analog. It has to be analog. Yeah, okay.
No technology whatsoever. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I've what's called a remarkable. It gives you the same touch and feel as a pencil, and you can handwrite on it. So, but I don't use an iPad because that's glass, whereas a remarkable has a very, very different touch and feel. But it's more the fact of handwriting. So all I'm saying is, don't use a smartphone and don't do a keyboard or a laptop or whatever. It's handwriting that is the critical piece.
Okay.
So you start off writing. Now, there's two ways of doing this. So I'll start off with one. You start off handwriting every single thought that comes into your head. Now, if you may think, yeah, but I've no thoughts. You're constantly thinking. Your mind, your conscious mind, is constantly verbalizing every single thing that you're thinking, saying, and doing. So you've got plenty of thoughts. So what you're doing is you're handwriting every single thought that comes into your mind. And even if it's a case of, oh, I don't know what to write, you write down, oh, I don't know what to write. You write down literally every single narrative, everything that your nature is saying in your head, you're writing that down. So that's one thing. But you keep continuing on, and you get to a flow or point whereby you just allow your intuitive side to come over. So it will, basically the first part is allowing the conscious mind just to get bored with itself. And it's just doing what it's narration, what it's saying. You're writing down what it's saying. But then once it's gotten bored, it will get to a point whereby you're just, all of a sudden you start getting other thoughts into your head, which are very, very different. They're more intuitive and they're more insightful. and it will give you messages and information from that perspective. So you just continue writing. Another way of using it is that you can start off with a question, and you can start off with, whatever it might be, what is the one thing I should do today? And you finish off with a question mark, and then you just continue. But you're continuing on writing, but it's just free flow writing. And it gets to the point whereby you can have a conversation with your intuitive side through the free flow writing. So you ask a question, and then you just write down exactly what comes to mind as you answer it. You don't think about the answer. You just write what actually flows into your mind. Some people's handwriting changes. I mean, physically, it looks very, very different to what their normal handwriting is. Some people use a different dialect, a different language even. So they might use a foreign language even when they get into a free flow stage of handwriting. And that's all tapping into your unconscious and your intuitive side. But you can get a huge amount of information from free flow writing or automatic writing, and to help you. And that helps to develop your intuition side as well.
I'm definitely right. That's prompted me to go back to it. And I think to round it off for people, when you're doing the automatic writing, and I used to liken it to, you turn on the hot tap and it's not always going to be hot straight away. You need to turn on the tap, let it go from cold to tepid to warm to hot. And I think the writing I used to find like that, I used to spend the first 3 to 5 minutes. This is boring. This is ridiculous. The sun is shining. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm hungry. And you almost need to get that childlike buffer out of the way, because you're obviously creating that barrier for yourself just to let it go, because then we are automatically going back into that woo-woo. I can't do this. This is stupid. Like, close your eyes and imagine next. I'm not doing that. And it's almost, the caveat for people is let the water get hot. Again, I found it fascinating that I write down, I sit there and I just go from absolute gobbledygook where I'm fed up and I'm almost embarrassed by myself. I'm sitting there on my own writing something. I'm not Oscar Wilde. And then suddenly you start to write stuff and you're answering a question or asking a question. And I found it got me very creatively activated, and it got me to think of something in a different way, which feeds into when I go for a drive, like we said before, instead of sitting at a desk. So I think this is an opportunity for people to really look into that and try it. And it's a fun takeaway from this episode, because I think everyone's got a piece of paper and a pen. Sit down in a room and, as I say, turn on the tap, let it go through your gobbledygook and your embarrassment, and then maybe ask yourself a question, which I think everyone could do, which I think is a great way to really lean into what the intuitive side of life is. And again, for everyone, beware of the feather, the brick and the truck, because that is something I use at least once a day in conversation with people, because if you don't notice a feather, you're going to get hit by a brick and eventually get walloped by a truck. So until next time, I look forward to speaking with you again, Paul. Thanks a million. And that's it for another episode of Beyond Just Business. If it gave you something to think about, or it helped you see things a little differently, we're delighted. But make sure you're following so you don't miss out on the next episode. Stay curious, keep questioning, and we will see you next time.